Welcome, everybody. It's so nice to be here. I'm Becky Bailey. Pastor Tom Kinder is on break for the second of 2 Sundays, and we have the pleasure of having a guest speaker today, Pat Autilio, and we're so happy to have him. I'll introduce him a little later. First, I would like to thank so much the Canternote Church musicians and say what a pleasure it is to have you come regularly, and Rachel Kurland, Susan Hodges, and Sarah Cantor, you just really fill us with joy. That's just beautiful music, beautiful music. Before we get going, are there any announcements? All right, Jim.
I have 2 announcements. One, in talking with Kay this morning, I realized that not everyone knows about a new venture that we're exploring and now looks like it will come to pass. Some of you will remember that there was a preschool that shared the space during the weeks, during the days. There were little kids back there. And we received a proposal a couple months ago and have been working out the details to introduce a creative nursery, which will be affiliated with the creative preschool in the other village, but for infants and toddlers. So there's a bunch of questions that come up about sharing space, and the main excitement that I have is that there will be little people back there and laughter, and the playground will become a playground again. So if you have questions, it's not a fait accompli, but there don't seem to be too many obstacles, and there's a lot of enthusiasm, and there's really a need in our town. The second thing I want to mention is many of you know Sylvia Smith as a congregation member and in the Contemplative Circle. She's going to give a concert this coming Saturday at 7 o'clock, and it will be a combination of poems. She mentioned Wendell Berry. I know he's one of the poets she's going to feature, and a piece of music. And Sylvia is a percussion specialist who also has really explored the medium of spoken word and percussion. So I invite you to come. This is very much becoming a performance space. Musicians are contacting us and saying, can we have an evening? Thank you.
Hi, I'm Kate Rymanis. We are going to have our Fulfilling Our Vision meeting on Tuesday, February, whatever the next Tuesday is. The first Tuesday in February, thank you, at 7. And we have an established committee, but really all are welcome. So if you're curious about what this Fulfilling Our Vision work is, you can reach out to me. Loosely, we are committed to being truly open and welcoming to all. So we're exploring always what that means. We've become an open and affirming congregation. We're working to learn how to better support our Abenaki neighbors in Vermont and support other Native Americans through a fund we're establishing, but also the education that goes along with being good neighbors. So that's loosely it. And all are welcome to this meeting on whatever the first Tuesday in February is. Thank you.
Any other announcements? Okay. Now we'd like to continue with a prelude. Thank you, Sarah, for that piece that really invited us into this space of contemplation and listening and considering. We are now going to read together the blessing and lighting of the peace candle in your bulletin. In Christ was life, and the life was the light of the world. Light shines in the darkness, and the darkness does not overcome it. Let us pray for peace and the things that make for peace as we light the peace candle. Amen. So it's now time for our first congregational round. We're going to be singing in 3 parts today with the help of a couple of people leading and the choir interspersed there among you, and all you singers who aren't necessarily a member of the choir. So I'll teach it to you first, and then we can sing it together. In your bulletin, what a goodly thing. So I'll just sing a line and you sing it back to me, okay? What a goodly thing. What a goodly thing. If the children of the world, if the children of the world could dwell together, could dwell together in peace. Beautiful. We're going to have now ask Sarah to come up and lead this group, and Rolf, if you wouldn't mind kind of going to the back and lead the sort of folks on the back left there, I think. We've got a nice little contingent, starting with the Cowdens. There you go. And you're going to be my group, okay? So we'll be part 1, they'll be part 2, you'll be part 3, but just follow your leader. And we're all going to sing it all together one time, and then probably 3 times or as many as the Spirit moves us after that in round, okay?
Do you come in after on the 3rd measure or the 5th measure?
You come in on where the asterisks are.
Oh.
Except for the 4th asterisk, just ignore that one, because we only have 3 parts, but that's okay. Here we go, all together first. Ready, and. What a goodly thing, if the children of the world could dwell together in peace. No, I'm sorry. What a goodly thing, if the children of the world could dwell together
I consider myself our town's poetry fast squad. So yesterday Becky said, "Can you think of a reading?" And sometimes people call me and say, "We have a wedding. What can you propose?" So keep that in mind. I'm going to read a poem by Wallace Stevens. A few years ago, 10 years ago or so, I edited a book, 19 American poets musing, exploring, ruminating upon this question of faith and belief from all different perspectives. Various kinds of Christian upbringings, Jewish, Buddhist, Muslim, Old Order Amish, Wiccan, Muskogee Creek, which is an indigenous tradition in the central part of North America, and various kinds of skepticism, but sharing this question of how do you relate to the world and your fellow humans via this complex question of belief and faith. So this poem is not easy to understand prosaically, but Wallace Stevens was one of the most magnificent musicians of the English language. So you'll see the relevance, especially after Pat does his presentation. But for now, I'm just asking you to trust me. And because we don't have a long service, I'm going to read it twice. Less and less human, O savage spirit. If there must be a God in the house, must be, saying things in the room and on the stair, let him move as the sunlight moves on the floor, or moonlight, silently as Plato's ghost or Aristotle's skeleton. Let him hang out his stars on the wall. He must dwell quietly. He must be incapable of speaking, closed, as those are, as light, for all its motion is, as color, even the closest to us, is, as shapes, though they portend us, are. It is the human that is the alien, the human that has no cousin on the moon. It is the human that demands his speech from beasts or from the incommunicable mass. If there must be a God in the house, let him be one that will not hear us when we speak, a coolness, a vermilioned nothingness, any stick of the mass of which we are too distantly apart. If there must be a God in the house, must be, saying things in the room and on the stair, let him move as the sunlight moves on the floor, or moonlight, silently as Plato's ghost or Aristotle's skeleton. Let him hang out his stars on the wall. He must dwell quietly. He must be incapable of speaking, closed, as those are, as light for all its motion is, as color even the closest to us is, as shapes, though they portend us, are. It is the human that is the alien, the human that has no cousin in the moon. It is the human that demands his speech from beasts or from the incommunicable mass. If there must be a God in the house, let him be one that will not hear us when we speak, a coolness, a vermilioned nothingness, any stick of the mass of which we are too distantly apart.
Thank you, Jim. Before we sing this, the anthem, the choir sings the anthem, I want to, the words are a little hard to follow as we sing them, and I want to give you a chance to hear them spoken before we sing them. They're by Matthew Arnold. They were written to this tune, but they're not the familiar ones. We just felt like this service, we needed kind of a different set of lyrics for this familiar tune, Tallis Canon, by Thomas Tallis. So I'll read the two verses. Calm soul of all things, make it mine to hear amid the city's jar, noise, that there abides a peace of thine I did not make and cannot mar. The will to neither strive nor cry, the power to feel with others give. Calm me more, nor let me die before I have begun to live.
Come, soul of all things, make it mine to hear amid the city's jar that there abides a peace of thine I did not make and cannot mar. The
All right. We've gotten through lots of preliminaries. Now we want to welcome Pat up, and I want to tell you a little bit about him. He's a retired engineer and manager, and he and Marcia have been in the Upper Valley since 2018, and I got to know him first through one of his great passions, which is music. He was a member of, he showed up at the Thetford Chamber Singers, now called Upper Valley Voices, which he's sung with ever since. And right away, proved himself not only to be a wonderful musician, but also just, generous, thinking about the group, open-minded, caring, and very well organized. So he's brought that kind of talent to a lot of things here in the Upper Valley, especially not only the TCS, but also the V-Tones. I've had the pleasure of singing in an a cappella group with him for the past couple of years, and we're just having a wonderful time. But also to many social justice efforts. And currently, the ones that I caught up with he was part of the Vermont Racial Justice Alliance, which you might remember a couple of years ago, there was an analysis done of traffic stops in Vermont that looking at racial differences, and it was very significant information that was brought to light about how our police force treats people who are Black, Indigenous, people of color. He chairs the Hartford Committee on Racial Equity and Inclusion, which has been very active. And today he's especially representing the Upper Valley Humanists, which he's been a part of since moving to the Upper Valley. And I was struck by one thing. Don't want to steal your speech here, Pat, but I was struck by this statement from the Upper Valley Humanists that we look to human explanations, including I can't read my writing, including the results of scientific inquiry, rather than divine revelation for guidance on how to live well. So we'd like to invite Pat to come up and tell us more about this topic today.
Yeah, so that's it in a nutshell. I think Becky said it well. So yes, it's been a topic that has interested me most of my life. How does a humanist think about morality? And I didn't always think of it in those terms, and I'll explain in a minute why humanism and what morality means, and why God gets into the picture. But first of all, I should tell a little bit about my background, who I am, and how I got here. So I was born in upstate New York, and my father was an Irish Catholic, and I was baptized Catholic, and that's why my name is Patrick Allen. My father and mother divorced when I was quite young, and I wound up growing up with my mom and her parents, who were my grandmother was Christian, my grandfather was Jewish, and we celebrated all the fun holidays. We had Easter and Christmas, and I grew up sitting through long Passover Seders spoken in Hebrew. So, and meanwhile, my mother remarried, and that's when I became Autilio. But my father was not Catholic. He was Italian, but he was Presbyterian. That's another story. So, yeah, I'm a confirmed Presbyterian at that. And so the sum total of all that upbringing, by the time I was in my 20s, I didn't have any firm belief in any sort of religious faith. And I always liked reading philosophy, and it was pretty obvious to me early on that being a non-believer doesn't say much about who you are. I'm also a non-golfer and a non-skier and a non-Chinese speaker. And so when we moved to the Upper Valley, we're reaching out to find people to of common interest, and we found the Upper Valley Humanists group. They've been around for a while, and I realized that there's a belief system I could wrap my mind around. It was really consistent with what I felt. So, yeah, so that's kind of how I got here. And I have trouble keeping my head down, so I'm now the leader of the Upper Valley Humanists, but it's fine. Marshall helps me a lot. So, yeah, so what is humanism anyway, and why are we talking about it? Well, so it's exactly that. You know, if we think about, there's 1 billion people who have professed non-belief in God in the world. That's a pretty big number. And, you know, we ask ourselves, you know, are those 1 billion people the source of all the violence and bad things going on? I don't think so. You know, the humanist position is that people are influenced in one way or the other by a number of factors, right? To do better or worse things in their life through biology and their ability to reason and the events in their lives, things that happen to them, and their surrounding culture and communities. So a humanist, and I'm going to be quoting here from the American Humanist Association, which is the one that our little group in Upper Valley adheres to, and they have a nice little website. And so humanism, this is from them, the American Humanists. It says, humanism is a progressive philosophy of life that without theism or supernatural beliefs affirms humankind's ability and responsibility to lead ethical lives of personal fulfillment that aspire to the greater good. So, should I get closer to the microphone? Right? So that's humanism is the best way I've found to get from non-belief to an ethical framework, and I'll kind of walk you through that. Okay? So, first of all, we think about, often it's couched in terms of good without God. Okay? So let's take a minute and say, well, what are we talking about when we say being moral or being good? All right, so some examples I would throw out there are, you know, cooperation, charity, assisting others, altruism, volunteerism is, you know, ways of behaving well toward other people. The golden rule gets you very far here. And I have here the golden rule. I came across a list of the golden rule appears in the canon, the doctrines of religions all over the world. Here in the Buddhism, in the Buddhist Udana Varga says, hurt not others in ways that you yourself would find hurtful. It's pretty close to the golden rule, we know. Islam. No one of you is a believer until he desires for his brother that which he desires for himself. That's from the Islam Sunnah. So that's a good working definition for good. They'll get us started here, okay? Behaving well toward others, and I'll also say toward the rest of the world. Nature, the environment, animals, not just humans. Humanism as a belief system it's a bit of a misnomer because it seems like it's all about humans, but it's about more than that too. It's about how humans should behave, but how they should behave everywhere in the world. Okay, so, and then one more definition, we talk about what do we mean by God? Belief, right? So just briefly, I'll say, let's think about God as for any supernatural power that is claimed to provide a set of absolute moral rules that cannot be changed or questioned. There are many definitions you could think of what the religious people believe in, and they might not all adhere to that, what I just said, but let's go with that for the moment. Okay, so I'm going to walk you through kind of my own thinking here, and then give you some of the positions that, or some of the statements that the humanists make officially. So my intuition is, and this gets to those 1 billion non-believers worldwide. Are they really all the bad actors, or is that? I think that all people want to think of themselves as being good and moral, and they want others to see them that way. And people behave in a wide variety of ways, but if you get inside their heads and you understand them, you realize that they think of themselves as doing the right thing, and that it's important to them that they are perceived as doing the right thing. Okay, so that's a starting point. Now, what influences our behavior as humans? I mentioned biology and genetics. So, clearly, the base, our basic nature as a human creature provides us with certain needs and desires and abilities. We need to shelter and food and that sort of thing, and notably our brains are part of that, and our ability to reason and act rationally is quite important here, because it allows us to think about the future and to think about the consequences of our actions. And that's another influence. So biology, genetics, reason, ability to think about the future. Our culture is important. The environment we grew up in, the people we grew up in, our community, our friends, our family, people we go to school with, have a tremendous influence on us. And life events, natural disasters, wars, all that sort of thing, the incursion from other countries or whatnot. Yeah, all these things pushing and pulling on us, okay? So when we think about, okay, so what encourages bad behavior from those causes, right? So first of all, I should say, I don't think anybody's all bad or all good, right? There's nobody's, well, it's a shorthand we use, right? Oh, that's a good person. Oh, that's a bad person. And we know what we mean, but nobody's all bad, nobody's all good. But what encourages bad behavior, okay? So, and what is bad behavior? So I'm thinking of bad behavior as kind of the opposite of what I said before, like around goodness, but deceit, manipulation, being hateful toward others, causing violence or harm toward others. Yeah, we'll call that bad, all right? So a big cause of that is fear and mistrust of those others, okay? And this is a big one, right? Others are people who are outside of our family, they're outside of our friend group, they're outside of our community, they're of a different race, they're a different ethnicity, a different religion, a different nationality. Yeah, that's a huge cause for people to behave badly toward other folks. You can't deny it. And related to that is they look or act differently, right? They dress differently, they act differently, they don't look the same. And right or wrong, we behave badly toward people like that sometimes. And so the fear and mistrust of others. And also desperation pushes people are pushed to the limits in many ways in this world, through scarcity and want, food insecurity, dislocation, insecurity of all kinds, being dislodged from your home and your place where you lived, and illness. It could be not just mental illness, but physical illness can kind of push you to the brink. All these things are compelling reasons why people behave badly. And it's just a sad fact of the world. Some of these we have more control over than others, perhaps, in the way we think about them or the way we deal with them. All right, so that's the bad news. So what encourages ethical and good behavior? So, as I said, everyone wants to think of themselves as a good person. And we have this, as humans, this fairly unique ability to empathize and to take another's perspective. And that's a very valuable thing to have, to be able to, it's called mirror neurons, right? We can imagine ourselves, what the other person's thinking about us and what they're thinking about their lives and so on and so on. That's important. And we should bear in mind that humans are social creatures by their nature and by necessity. We as individuals do not do well all by ourselves. We may think so sometimes, but we rely on others in so many ways. And it's important. That interaction with all those others in our community, our family, friend group, and so on is so important. So that ability to empathize and to build social capital, that fear of losing your status within your group, within your community, that fear is real. And you want to grow your status, and you want to, again, be sought as a good person. And you want to have a circle of people around you that know you, that trust you, that you have good interactions with. That's pretty darn important. And New Englanders are famous for that, right? Communitarianism. Go us. Yeah. And there's all kinds of behaviors that promote that, right? Like, you help me, I'll help you, you pay it forward, and what goes around comes around. There's all this thinking that just kind of naturally, logically, we engage in that helps that community spirit. And it's all born of, just feeling a sense of belonging and the fact that you're doing good stuff. All right, so that's kind of my thought process there. So what's a humanist to do? So where's the humanism come in? Well, so humanists will say we should recognize that all humans are the same in fundamental ways, right? All people are created equal. And and to recognize that each human has a similar set of needs to flourish in this world. And so you should extend your empathy to all people. So now quoting from, the humanists, American humanists, do not have a large canon. They don't have a big fat document you can read, but they have something called the Humanist Manifesto. Sounds very, revolutionary, right? And they're up to Manifesto number 3. The first one was written back in the early 1900s, and now they're on Manifesto 3, and you can find it on the website. And this is from the Humanist Manifesto. Ethical values are derived from human need and interest as tested by experience. Humanists ground values in human welfare shaped by human circumstances interests and concerns and extended to the global ecosystem and beyond. We are committed to treating each person as having inherent worth and dignity, and to making informed choices in a context of freedom consistent with responsibility. Okay. So, one more thing. How does that play out in the world for humanists? Okay, some practical steps, news you can use. So we should live as one ought and set a good example. We should participate in the real world. Get out there. Cooperate with and help others. Reach out. Meet people where they are. Develop trust and community. Defend the rule of law and democratic principles. Two more quotes from the manifesto. Life's fulfillment emerges from individual participation in the service of humane ideals. Working to benefit society maximizes individual happiness. That's all I have to say, but I will point you to some reading. AmericanHumanist.org is where that manifesto is. There's a couple books I could show you I brought with me. One's called Good Without God, interestingly enough. What a Billion Non-Religious People Do Believe. That's the one resource I drew upon here today. That's written by Greg Epstein, who's the humanist chaplain at Harvard University. Another book I really enjoy in this context is called Humankind, A Hopeful History by Rutger Bregman. And it talks about, depending on our mood maybe, we think about people are naturally bad and they got to become good, or they're naturally good and they become bad. He says there's a lot of things about human nature that naturally point to the fact that they just want to be good, they're just trying to be good, and they behave kindly, naturally, given half a chance. He gives an example of soldiers in wars up through history. Vast majority of them never fire their gun. It's the last thing they want to do is fire their gun at somebody else. And they've got studies and statistics on it. Anyway, it's a very interesting read. That's Humankind, A Hopeful History, and Good Without God. And I thank you very much. I thank you so much for having me.
We'll sort of vary from the format here because I think there's just a sort of lot of specific things that this brings up, and we want to take some time before we go on to, general joys and concerns. If you have some thoughts or questions that are that have been prompted right now, this would be a great time to talk about them, and keep Pat up here in the hot spot for a little bit longer. One thing that just came to my mind is. Jim and I just finished reading a really disturbing and good book by Jeff Sharlet called The Undertow. He teaches at Dartmouth. He's a wonderful journalist, and he went across the whole country and really looked into people who are really taken up by conspiracy theories and really crazy stuff from my perspective. Yeah. And he talked with them and in the friendliest terms and drew them out. And all sorts of things come to mind. And one of them in particular is like the sense of belonging. And when you talked about, one of the things that makes us be good is that sense of belonging. What are your thoughts about when a sense of belonging makes us not be what we would call good?
Right, that's a two-edged sword. And I read The Undertow last year. It's very interesting take on it. Yeah. So, yeah, the sense of belonging. I've talked about how important that is, and the challenge here is that you got to think of beyond. You got to think of the group you're belonging to, and the people that by extension you do not want to ostracize those who are outside of your immediate group. You should aspire to bring those to build the same faith and trust and relationship with those who are not currently in that little group. And that's the challenge, right? That we have our own comfortable group and those scary others on the outside, how to reach out to them and engage with them. But that's at least as important, right? I think that's where the problems come in.
Sorry. Maybe that's also partly where the rule of law comes in, where you try to, extend not just in a preferential way, but you try to extend things to everyone. Law being imperfect and needing constant revision and all that.
Yeah, these are not easy things.
No.
Not easy things.
So I just want to open it up to anybody else who would like to have something. Susan.
When you were talking about the factors and influences that make people tend to be bad, I noticed that you did not mention greed. And it seems like greed is a pretty important factor in our world today.
That's perfectly fair, and it's a good point, and maybe it should be on the list because greed is not always driven by need, right, or want, or shortage, or insecurity. It could be just an end in itself at some point, as Ebenezer Scrooge might say, right? Yeah, good point.
Thank you very much. If the shorthand is good without God, is there a humanist view of God? Is God just unnecessary, irrelevant? Is there if you think about the relationship between humanism and religious belief, have the humanists adopted a position on all that?
Yeah, and I should be very clear about that. The humanism, which is, I believe it's a shortened, you should be secular humanism. But yeah, there is no belief in a God or a power beyond supernatural. So the notion of God does not enter into the humanist belief system. The humanist looks out at the various world religions and sees different gods with different codes that are believed, but it doesn't have one of its own. I'm not sure I answered your question. There's no belief in the supernatural or an ineffable, something that by definition cannot be known, and that's you get into questions of faith, of believing things in the absence of evidence, in the absence of faith can mean the believing in things that are not possible to prove through physical means, through the real world. So nothing like that, nothing of spirituality. Just it's absent to a humanist.
I was interested in your mentioning the golden rule being a shared precept among many, many different traditions. And the golden rule, as I learned it as a child, was do unto others as you would like them to do to you. But in recent years, I've been hearing people propose and advocate an adjustment of that as do unto others as they would like to be done unto, which it requires learning. It requires not just knowing what you like, but actually we are all the same, yes, and we have the same rights, but we actually aren't all the same, and we have different cultures, and we have different physical abilities, and we have different preferences and enthusiasms, and I love that idea, but it's never ending. It's not set. I could know what I like, but have to keep it's more than empathy. It's somehow, well, it's a bigger empathy.
Yeah, I've heard that revision to the Golden Rule. I think it makes a lot of sense, right? Just, I don't want the same things you want in general. There's probably some core things, but yeah, that's a great observation. And the other thing you observed earlier, I should have mentioned, is that the Golden Rule is in all these world religions, and none of them mention a God or a need for a God in the Golden Rule.
Thanks for the talk. This is fun. Yeah, so I was raised, in Christian belief system, and had this very strong belief as a teenager that if you didn't believe in God, like morality would just fall apart, and chaos would result. And that's clearly not the case, right? Because turns out we're social creatures. We need each other. All the what we call morality is really pro-social behavior. Antisocial behavior is really what we call, amoral behavior. And so, this is the point. That said, That said, people who believe in God are happier and they live longer. We know this. This is just from these large studies that they do. Similarly, people who take vitamins live longer, and they know that vitamins don't do anything. I mean, you open up septic systems and you find they're full of these vitamin pills. Nevertheless, people who take them live longer. And so, you should be the kind of person who takes vitamins, but you should not take them. You should save your money because they don't do any good. And so, it's kind of this funny thing. And so, yeah, you necessarily need God, but that doesn't mean that there is no God, because you can't prove the negative, right? And it's probably valuable to believe in God, because you'll be happier and you'll live longer, at least on average. And so, in my mind, there's still questions.
Sure, and then we'll come to John. Yeah, go ahead.
I was going to answer that, but go ahead.
Oh, it's a very interesting thought, and I come to this church particularly because it offers lots of thought divergence in traditional religion. But often it's not necessarily the God or the vitamins, like you said, but it's the type of people it's their behaviors in general, the gathering, the maybe a little more educated and thoughtful and purposeful in what they do. So it is, you'll never know their reasoning. Quite intriguing. John, may I ask a question really fast? I know you wanted the mic. What? Can I ask a question? I know you wanted the mic. In the humanist community, is there conversation regarding this law and order that you speak of? Because often in itself is inhumane.
Well, law and order is certainly criminal justice is something of concern to many humanists, okay? And the flaws of the criminal justice system and the carceral system in this country. When I say rule of law, I just mean, I mean something a little more fundamental, which means we all agree that we need a legal system where we're a nation of laws and not people. That we have laws that govern behavior and treat everyone equally. But it's quite different than how our police system behaves, if you know what I'm saying. Criminal justice is definitely a big concern. And the problems with the criminal justice system, big concern in the humanist community. Yeah.
All right, well, thank you.
So I understand about the concept that you express about God, and I'm not really, and I recognize that organized religion has done probably as much bad as as it has done good. But the thing that I think that I value is the more spiritual aspect, and by that I mean the wonder and the grace that I feel, whether in nature or by reading poetry or listening to music. It's whether or not there is something beyond that takes me beyond myself. And the singer Iris DeMent wrote a song called "Let the Mystery Be." And it kind of speaks to my own feeling is I really don't know what it's all about, but I love the mystery and I love the inspiration and joy and comfort that it gives me.
Yeah, and I want to say here to a couple of your comments that, I'm not here to bury religion or to praise it. I'm not here to convince you that humanism is better, that religion is wrong. There's plenty of value in the religious community, in what is provided not only when you go to church and belong to a group like this, but also in many of the teachings and readings and things that have flowed out of the various religious traditions of tremendous value and brought our culture to a great place. So I hope I haven't given you the impression that, I was trying to tear it down in any way or saying humanism is better.
Yeah, I think we can all agree, and sorry if the conversation seemed to take that direction. I want to give Marcia.
Thank you. Okay, I'm Pat's wife, and when Pat and I got married, he married into a family of non-believing Jews, and I grew up in a 3-generation household. My grandparents lived with us as well, and my grandmother had had a particularly hard life. Her family had stayed in Europe through World War I. She lived in a war-torn city. She could remember standing on soup lines. She was malnourished. And at one point, the war had ended, but there was still shooting between 2 apartment buildings because you had Polish people in one and Russian people in the other, and they hated each other. And a neighbor was ill, and her mother went out to the well to try to get water for the neighbor and was shot. And she watched her mother bleed to death. They couldn't get out to her. 2 of her brothers tried, and they got shot but made it back to the house. And she told me that in that moment, she lost her faith. And I remember thinking, well, if she lost her faith, that means she had it at one point, because you can't lose something unless you've had it. And I talked to her a lot about that as I was growing up, because she said she never really got it back, even after they came to America and had achieved a certain modest level of comfort and lived very well. But she said she didn't get it back, and I always remained puzzled. What was it that she had? And I can't get to that. And I have tried through music, through poetry especially, and those things can really take you out of yourself and be a tremendous experience. But for me, it just does not go beyond that. And I think that humanism has kind of given me a home and a community in that sense, because that's just where I am.
Okay, I think we'll just wrap it up with Rolf here.
I didn't want to bat cleanup. Just a couple quick thoughts. I'm always struck by how automatic good, kind behavior is to the untutored, to children, animals, just respond automatically and instantly with empathy. If a little kid's crying in the playground, another little kid will often just go up and offer them a toy or, pat their hair, and the dog will come sit on your lap when you're sick. It seems to me that intact mammals, neurologically, tend to respond automatically and abundantly with goodwill. So the question for me has always been, how do you get adults back to the place where they can feel and hear their own hearts and their own internal motivation? Which ties into my second point, which is that often it seems that an externalized version of the self needs to be present in order to obey your own self. So, for example, when I was raised Irish Italian Catholic also, and I had extensive conversations with God for my first 12 years on the planet, and I wore a cross and all the things, and these were very deep, important, fulfilling conversations where I would get great answers, And I remember as clearly as if it was yesterday, walking to the subway one day. I was 12 years old, and having this long talk with God, and it all of a sudden occurred to me, I'm talking to myself here, it was like, whoa, that's so much easier. So I took off the cross and never put it back on, and that was the end of my faith in an external authority. But those 12 years really taught me that it can be very effective to have an externalized authority figure version of your own internal process. So I've always understood that religion is functional for a lot of people, and I suspect that it has something to do with maternal and paternal figures, and there's probably some functions, some adaptive advantage to having that sort of imaginary big daddy or mommy, in the air above you, helping you do the things that you want to do anyway. So I don't really see the contradiction actually between humanism and religiosity. It's just sort of two different neurological states.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much, Pat. Did you want to say anything as a wrap-up?
No, I just thank you all for your thoughtful comments and observations. It was very interesting. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Marcia. Thank you so much. It was great.
Round and round the earth is turning. Round and round the earth is turning. Turning also into morning. Turning always into morning. And from morning into night. And from morning into night. That's the hard part. It's easier when you do it in the line because down one note, so that'll be easier. Let's do it together all the way through, okay? And then we'll get into our round situation. Here we go. 1, 2, 3, 4. Round and round the earth is turning, turning always into morning, and from morning into night. Great. Let's bring up our round leaders, Sarah and Rolf. Get into position so we can do it in 3 parts. Okay?
Same positions as before?
Yes, please.
Okay, all right.
We'll go all together one time and then go into our positions. All right, here we go. All together. Round and round the earth is turning, turning always into morning, and from morning into night. Round and round the earth is turning, turning always into morning, and from morning into night. Round and round the let's just take ourselves into a time of quiet to reflect and just listen to what's in your heart. Amen. Before I read the benediction, I want to say we have coffee hour. Thank you very much, Kate Rymanis, for setting up. I guess she's back there doing that. But I hope you'll join us back for coffee. There's decaf as well, and little treats and chance to talk more. So our benediction today is Philippians chapter 4, verse 8. Finally, beloved, whatever is true, whatever is honorable, whatever is just, whatever is pure, whatever is pleasing, whatever is commendable, if there is any excellence and if there is anything worthy of praise, think about these things. Keep on doing the things you have learned and received and heard and seen in me, and the God of peace will be with you.